everyone, this is Bryce. You probably know me better as eSportslaw, or maybe just that lawyer that's been posting a lot on Reddit lately. I wanted to do a short vlog covering some of what I feel are the undercovered parts of the SpectateFaker story, and maybe offer some thoughts on how we move forward and set a precedent that everyone can be happy with, or at least that the majority of people can be happy with. So, for starters, I'm not going to get into the actual situation itself. There's been so many Reddit posts about that just in the last 3 days alone. I feel like if you don't know the story already, you probably don't want to know, and then you're not watching this vlog to begin with. You know, I think it's a really important issue, and one that has severe precedential value, not just for League, but for all esports, because streaming affects all esports. It's a huge part of the economic ecosystem. And so I think it's really important that we think through how to get this right and how to come up with a solution that the parties can be happy with. So one of the important parts of the industry, and one of the reasons why esports has blown up over the last few years, is streaming, right? I mean, it's been the growth of Twitch, but not just Twitch. It's been Azubu and Hitbox, MLG.TV, and there are still others to come. Streaming allows pro players the ability to play the game full time and to generate significant revenue while they're practicing to supplement their tournament income, facilitates increased sponsorship income, etc. So from the player's perspective, streaming is vital. And then you look at it from the broadcaster perspective and you think, what do these platforms really need? And a huge part of that need is exclusivity. It's the same reason why sports leagues sign exclusive TV deals, right? The value of being able to air certain contests or a certain player's content is only valuable if they have to go to your platform for that content. So how much money would ESPN play to air NBA games if they were also airing on 10 other channels simultaneously, right? So you look at it from the broadcaster's perspective, and you say, what do they really need? Well, they need exclusive content providers, people that will cause people like myself or people like you to tune in to their network, tune in to their platform. And that's why, in this situation, Kesba has this exclusive deal with Azubu. Now, in the case of SpectateFaker, it's obviously circumventing the existing rules, and I've written an article about the kind of legal context, copyright law, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and how all that comes into play. Now, I don't think that Azubu was correct in trying to have, saying its intellectual property was being infringed and trying to get the SpectateFaker stream taken down. That being said, I'm extremely sympathetic with their business interests and with what they're after, which is the exclusivity that they paid for in the Kesba deal and that they thought they were going to get. When that deal was entered, they didn't necessarily anticipate the change and the emergence of the Spectator API, which allowed SpectateFaker to come into being. Now, a lot has been talked about whether or not this is right or wrong, and there have been people demonizing the guy running SpectateFaker, and then on the other hand, there have been people absolutely defending him. I see both sides of that argument. I think what's really important, though, is that under the existing rules, what he was doing appears, to me at least, to be okay. And so the question is, do we want the rules to continue to exist as they are, or should they change to prohibit this type of conduct? Is this conduct holistically good or holistically bad? And I use the word holistically there, and I probably shouldn't, because we're absolutely operating in the shades of gray. Like I said, I see the merits on both sides of this. Now, that being said, we look at this and say, how can we do what's right for the parties involved? And that's the exact perspective I have to imagine Riot is looking at this. The game is their intellectual property, but they have economic interdependence with these streaming service providers. League of Legends, the game, would not be what it is today. It would not be as popular. Esports would not be as popular without the streaming service providers. So because those businesses are intertwined, Riot has to at least take these streaming service providers into account, while simultaneously staying true to its roots, which, if you look at the legal jibber jabber, it really is all about the community. They don't have to license their IP basically for all fan projects and to do it for free. They're not charging royalties for these third-party sites, all this content creation that comes up about League that really makes League esports so great. So I don't actually have a problem if Riot were to go back and want to change their terms of service or change the legal jibber jabber in order to carve out this type of behavior. If they think it's important for their streamers that something like this, streaming partners, for something like this not to go on, okay. I don't think we need to demonize the guy who is doing it. I don't really see this as a legal loophole. I see this as someone operating within the current framework of the law. But as these types of situations arise and we see what is available under the current law, we change them. When the internet first launched, there weren't all the plethora of internet-based criminal statutes and determinations of what is right or wrong in terms of conduct on the internet. DDoSing is illegal today. It wasn't when the internet was first invented. Someone had to figure out how to DDoS, then lawmakers had to have a conversation about whether or not this was good or bad, and then they had to change the law in order to protect against that type of behavior. And you've seen that in the LCS rules. You can go through the LCS rule book and say to yourself, oh, that rule came out of the NIP situation, or that's the Alex Garfield rule, right? As these situations come to the fore, Riot asks itself, is this the world we want to live in where things like this can happen? If not, okay, how can we change the rules to eliminate the conduct that we think is bad while still allowing for the conduct that we think is good? The reality is we've barely begun to scratch the surface of copyright issues with respect to streaming. But we do have before us one example of the SpectateFaker stream, and we have a company, the purveyor of the game, who thinks it's probably not, from my impression, based on Mark Merrill's public comments, that this probably isn't good for the scene, this probably isn't good for the players, there are economic rights at stake, rights of publicity at stake, etc. So what I want to look at is, okay, I think from the outside looking, it seems like Riot's going to change this. How do we do that while still protecting all of the amazing content generation that's such a vital part of the community? From my impression, it seems like the obvious move is a terms of service change. And I think you could do it specifically targeting the spectator client. One of the arguments that I've heard a lot is, well, if players have the right to say, don't stream me, then what about the other 9 guys in Bjergsen's game? Or what about the other 9 guys in Voyboy's game, right? These people who go and stream, they don't ask permission, and they really couldn't. It wouldn't be reasonable to expect the individual streamer to go ask the permission of the 9 other guys. So what could they do? Well, Riot could not touch streaming of your own gameplay and simply include a limitation on the right to stream the Spectator API and say, we give you broad licensing rights, all the language that currently exists, and then they could say, however, persons are only entitled to stream the Spectator API if 1, they are a part of the game, or 2, have permission from someone in the game to stream it. Or maybe you don't have that second part, I'm not sure. One of the things that I've been kicking around with people is sometimes the Spectator API leads to some really good things, right? A prime example of that would have been when the NA and EU players were in Korea for Worlds this year. Someone put together a stream basically following their climb throughout solo queue, and you got to watch these pros adapting to the Korean meta, and it was pretty cool. And as far as I know, none of the players had an issue with that. Now that was a somewhat different situation. It was targeting kind of all the pros collectively as opposed to one individual. And none of those games were being streamed. At least as far as I know, there weren't pros, none of the NA or EU pros were streaming their solo queue games when they were in Korea. So the balance is a little bit different, and maybe we need to find a way to tweak this rule to protect that. And maybe that's the second part of my proposal does that, right? Maybe these players will say, yeah, of course, you can throw us on this channel, that's great, it's good publicity for League, I have no issues with it. So that's my basic proposal, and I think that while it would make what SpectateFaker is doing, unlawful under the terms of service, I don't think that means that the guy running it is necessarily a bad guy, was doing anything wrongful. I think that this is a natural evolution. At the end of the day, Riot is really blazing a path. It's the leader on esports, and so it's figuring out a bunch of things as it goes. It's the streaming rules and regulations, their IP licensing, the LCS rules, and as these types of situations arise, it has to be able to be nimble. It's an ongoing, never-ending, extremely complex line drawing process, and I think it's that we as a community need to recognize that there are broad interests at stake, and that these things underlie the entire economic ecosystem of esports. And if a rule change needs to happen, okay, a rule change needs to happen. As long as we're having good dialogue about it, making sure we're tailoring these rule changes narrowly to only target the type of behavior that we think is bad while allowing all of the good stuff to continue, okay. And so yeah, I think I'll probably stop there. This was my first vlog. I hope you found it entertaining or interesting at the very least. Look forward to your feedback, and hoping to do a lot more of these in the future. Thanks a lot.